Now, I would request Shri Gurumurthy ji to share his views on the topic how a media person should be.
In fact, when I look back and find out how I became a journalist, I became a journalist by accident. In fact, many things in my life were accidents, but I appropriated them as my successes. When we thought of probing into industrial corruption, for the first time we were trying to identify the corrupter. We always try to identify the corrupt. But somebody bribes, and then only the person who accepts the bribe, he comes into the limelight. So, that means studying balance sheets, looking into figures, and that involves the skill of a chartered accountant. That's how I came into the picture, that I was supposed to get the material ready so that some journalists could write about it. But we found ultimately no journalists were interested in writing because he said it's all a boring subject. Who will read this subject? Even if you have all this material, you must have readers to read it. And nobody is going to read these things. And no journalist in Indian Express was willing to write on this subject. Then Ramnath Goenka and me sat and discussed this matter. And he told me, Guru, there is no option. You have to become a journalist yourself. That's how I became a journalist. You know, the chartered accountants are always specialists in writing what should be written in 100 words, in 1000 words. Because the size of the document determines the fees that the client will pay. So naturally, we were all used to drafting long documents. But now I am given the responsibility to do the reverse. I have to draft something which I could draft only in 1000 words, in 50 words. So I had to completely exorcise myself, bring about a revolutionary change in me, change my vocabulary, and recouple my sentences, and then that's how I became a writer. But contrary to the expectations of all the journalists, the first 3 articles transformed the whole atmosphere in the country. Because the people wanted it, the journalists did not know about it. You know, what started in March 1986, by the end of 1986, that became the national talk. It means that the media, the journalists were unaware of what the people were thinking. And when you clicked with what the people were thinking and not what the people were wanting, most people do not know what they want. And today the media is intending to give what the people want, what the people need. And you decide this is what the people need. This is what some Rakhi is what the people need. Maybe they are needing something else. And if you have that something else, you can set an agenda for the nation. I'll just take you to 1983 when the Prime Minister of India then at that time, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, she said when somebody asked her a question about corruption, that corruption is a global phenomenon, we cannot do anything about it. In fact, one of the judges of the Delhi High Court wrote a judgment in which he said, when the topmost person in the country rationalizes corruption like this, how can you stop corruption in this country? I don't think corruption could ever become an issue in this country. That was what the people were thinking, the media was thinking at that time. But in 1986, when we started the campaign against corruption, against both the briber and the corrupt, it became an issue in 1987. And in 1989, it completely swept out of power the most powerful Prime Minister ever with 404 members in Parliament. That means the people were willing, but you had your assumption that this is not a subject which the people will like because corruption is now a global phenomenon. The Prime Minister of India himself herself has said this. That means there is such a divergence between our assessment of the people and what the people are really. Now, most of the assessment about the people is based on the current media trends, the TRP trends about which Umesh Upadhyaya explained so beautifully. In fact, he set a lot of my mind thinking with a lot of questions. It only takes one newspaper to correct all the newspapers. It only takes one TV channel to correct all the TV channels. It takes one journalist to correct all the journalists. I will tell you my experience. Ramnath Goenka, with whom I worked, I was his advisor. In fact, I was 27 when he was 72 when I became his advisor. In fact, it used to be a joke at that time. So, we decided that the Indian Express will be the newspaper of newspapers. It will be the talk of the town. We will come out with that news, that undeniably factual news, that shocking news, no excitement, no falsity, no quibbling with words, straight attack on the corrupt, on the topmost. Indian Express accounted for 2 prime ministers and several chief ministers. Every expose of the Indian Express used to see a chief minister out, a minister out, the prime minister being voted out. It is possible for one media to transform the scenario, to set the national agenda, but we need a proprietor who is patriotic, who is a nationalist, who is courageous, who is willing to risk his very newspaper for this change. We talked about the market. In the market you generate money. And Umesh Upadhyaya said, unless you give these things, there won't be any demand for your channel. There won't be any advertisement. And so you will not be able to engage with journalists because you can't pay. It's all true. But it is also true that as there is a herd mentality among the people, the herd mentality can be reversed also. That's what happened in 1986. It is possible to reverse the herd mentality by producing an alternative. And the alternative is something which the present system, the present trend cannot produce. For example, the present trend today makes a world of difference. I'll tell you, now corruption is a very big issue in India. And the media played a very important role in the issue of corruption. But it did not pursue corruption. It did not pursue the corrupt. It made corruption a big issue. That means there is no leadership in the media which could say, yes, these are the 5 corrupt people in this country. And I'll tell you something which I wrote, and though many of you may not have an opportunity to read it. A news item came in Schweizer Illustrated magazine in Switzerland in 1991 that Rajiv Gandhi had a bank account in Switzerland with $2.5 billion in it. No newspaper in India would carry this newspaper, the news item. All newspapers were managed not to carry this news item. Statesman wrote about it. New Indian Express wrote about it. I repeatedly wrote about it. And when foreign money issue became a big issue, that the first family in this country was having $2.5 billion in 1991, which if it had put in US Treasury bonds, it would be $10 billion today. The media is silent. The people want this news. People would like to know about it. People would like that family questioned. Media is silent. That means the media would not like to do anything against a powerful person today. It is not the people do not want it. The people do not want these TRP ratings. People would like to know the truth. In fact, latest I wrote an article day before yesterday that there is a complete shift from a shy society into a shameless society today. You know, the society in our behavior, we conduct ourselves only because we feel shy to do a wrong thing. And the shyness is generated by the media. The media can shame a person, and so people are afraid. And what has happened today? Today I published this article day before yesterday that I have written about it in 2006, I have written about it in 2009, 2010, 2011, I am writing about it again, but nobody from the Gandhi family even has filed a suit against me. Because people have no shame left today even to defend their honor. That means the media, which can perform the function of shaming a person, it is not willing to do its job, and there is no market involved. In fact, if TV channels take this today and a leading newspaper, Times of India, sends a questionnaire to Mrs. Sonia Gandhi, please tell me, what do you think of the Schweitzer Illustrated news item which was carried in on such and such a date, 11th November 1991 is the date. And Eugenia Alberts, a Russian journalist, she uncovered all the KGB documents in which she found a document which said in 1985 Rajiv Gandhi expressed his deep gratitude at the monies that KGB was paying to the Gandhi family. No newspaper asked Sonia Gandhi, why don't you please give your comment on this? The people will be interested in it. If a news channel telecasts this, its TRP ratings will go up more than Aishwarya Rai can do for it. So it is only that we lack the courage to stand up to mighty people today. It has nothing to do with the market. The people constitute the market, no doubt. But there are people who want the right kind of news items also. That is the difference Ramnath Goenka made to the media. He could take a stand, and come what may, he will stand by it. His whole newspaper empire may collapse. He said, nothing doing, the government or the mighty man must answer. That's how the Bofors issue became a huge corruption issue at that time. So when you talk about how the media should be, if you want to make money, don't become a journalist. That is not the field to make money. Just like, one of my friends, he was an income tax official. His wife was always pestering, you are not making enough money, you are not making enough money. One day he came and handed over a letter to the Chief Commissioner of Income Tax. Sir, I am resigning. He said, such a brilliant officer, why are you resigning? Sir, I cannot make money in this. My wife is pestering. So I am going to become a lawyer tomorrow. I will begin making money. See the difference? If you want to make money, you should not be a government official. If you are a government official, you should be happy with the position you command, the respect you command, the authority you command. And that is the substitute for all the money that you can get. And if you want that earned money, then you are doing injustice to yourself, to the government, to the people. Like that, if you want to be a journalist, you must only be interested in a minimum standard of living. This is where the problem arises today. People who are journalists are buying farmhouses in Delhi. They can never afford it. How did they get the farmhouse? 10 crores, 15 crores, 20 crores. And most journalists go by cars, which even businessmen cannot afford. How do they get the cars? So, I feel, if you have to get the right kind of development in the media, the right change, It is the readers who have to organize themselves. As Umesh Upadhyaya said, the readers will have to organize themselves and ask the journalists, how did you get this car? How did you buy this farmhouse? Just like people are asking the politicians today, how did you get this money? The politician has become a symbol of corruption today. And many officials have become symbol of corruption today. Not because of their corruption, but because of their lifestyle. You know, in Madhya Pradesh, a husband and wife couple were found to have accumulated 300 crore worth of property, IAS officers. You see, it comes out in the lifestyle. And if there is an organization of readers which lists the top 50 journalists in this country and ask them, why, how did you get this Buick car, how did you get this farmhouse, how did you buy shares in this company, then the media will change. Today the media is unquestioned in this country. Politicians are questioned, civil services are questioned, even the judges are being questioned today. There is a writ petition against the former Chief Justice of India, Balakrishnan, who is also the National Human Rights Commission chairman. There is a writ petition against him, for an inquiry against him. The government itself says, yes, an inquiry has been conducted against him. Have you ever found any inquiry against a journalist or an editor? It is because the system is incompetent to act against him, impotent to act against him, because he will fix me tomorrow. A journalist is a terrifying person today. A media house is a very terrifying institution. And it is not power. It is not the power to construct, it is the power to disturb. The job that the media does today is to disturb. It doesn't make people think. It makes people disturbed. So, if you have to bring out an alternative, it cannot be self-regulation, because self-regulation by people who are determined to do wrong things, who are not having any compunction about doing wrong things, they cannot self-regulate. Self-regulation is people who want to improve, who have a longing to have a better way of conducting themselves. That will not work in this country. But there are enough number of very highly informed, patriotic, nationalistic, honesty-loving people in this country. And you can find some 1,000 people in Ahmedabad. I can find an equal number in Chennai. It is not impossible to form an organization of media beneficiaries. We are the beneficiaries of the media. And if such an organizations begin demanding explanation from the media house, how did you publish this news item? Tell us. And it can even ultimately result into audit of the media itself. And today, unless you demand this kind of explanation, ask them to respond, the situation is not going to get corrected. Otherwise, you need a Ramnath Goenka. Someone who is willing to risk his entire wealth, his liberty, because you have to face arrest. I was arrested at 12:30 in the night and questioned for 3 days without being allowed to sleep. And unless you are willing to subject yourself to that kind of treatment, you cannot stand by truth either. So it requires sacrifices, it requires hard work, it requires a contented life. The most important thing, a young journalist who wants to get into journalism and to make a mark, apart from other things, the opportunity that he may get or she may get, or the break in which channel or in which newspaper you get, the fundamental preparation has to be that my lifestyle will be based on minimal needs. Without that conviction, without that preparation, without attuning our life, our people who are nearby, because you are going to have enormous powers on hand. You can expose anyone, maybe a collector, maybe a big civil servant, maybe an MLA, maybe an MP, maybe a minister, and as you grow, even a prime minister. All these powers can be exchanged for money. I'll tell you my experience when we started investigative journalism, which was unknown in India. When we started investigating and publishing news item, people used to queue up to give you information because they know you will not sell that information. You will not betray the informer. What did the CBI question me for 3 days? How did you get this government document? Who gave you this document? They put me on lie detector test. They made me sleepless. But I said I will never disclose my source. Because my source is a very honest source. Some honest officer handed over the file to me. And all that the CBI wanted to know was, who was that honest officer who handed over the file to you? I could take all the problem. But if I had mentioned his name, his whole career would have been over. And he had nothing to gain. He only wanted the people to be informed of the fraud that was happening within the four walls of the government. So the journalist must be willing to protect his sources, whatever the cost. Are you prepared for it? Then you can go into journalism. Otherwise you can be that kind of journalist, as you see, the kind of promotional programs. This is also called journalism today. But if you are having something, for example, there are 20 students here. If 2 or 3 can be exceptions, that can make a huge difference. It is only exceptions who are needed today. I am not bothered about the entire media is like this. It will be like this. The Sun newspaper sells 5 million copies. The Times London sells only 5 lakh copies. The respect goes only to Times London. It doesn't go to Sun newspaper. Sun newspaper is a toilet newspaper. Everybody throws it in the toilet. But they like reading it, and there is advertisement, there is money in it. But that doesn't mean you get respectability. Respectability will go only with people who stand for something. And such a need is there in India. In fact, in the name of newspaper, you get a book every day. 60 pages, 70 pages, and if you fold it 4-way, you will get a 200-page book. That is newspaper today. There is a case for a 10-page paper today, in which there is only relevant news. If you have an advertisement-free newspaper, there are people who are willing to buy it today. You need an entrepreneur to conceive a business model for that. You need a serious journalist who will head this enterprise. And in fact, when herd has taken the country to one side, there is a longing to get into another side, but you need a business mind, you need a business model, you need an entrepreneur, you need a missionary, you need a visionary who can give the alternative. The alternative need maybe only 5%. The Indian Express circulation was not the highest when it transformed the scene in the country. But it produced such stories, such original stories, such investigative stories, such courageous stories. The parliament could not ignore it. The other media could not ignore it. Because once you put an exposure in parliament and the parliament explodes, all newspapers have to carry what happened in the parliament, why it happened in the parliament. In fact, the Indian Express, we started something different. When some other newspaper did a job, and the matter was taken up in the parliament, we began writing the name of that newspaper. We said the Times of India report was read out in parliament, as a result of which this happened. We shamed the other newspapers. Why don't you name the newspaper which has created this situation? You can change. In fact, even though many newspapers write, a newspaper which has said this, if it is a bad news item, they will say not this newspaper. If it is a good news item, they will not say that also. You are a journalist, you know how to put it. So, a broad-minded journalism resorted to by one newspaper can transform the newspaper scenario in the country. The same thing applies to the visual media. So, it is our assumptions about what the people need that is dictating the market. It is not anybody, nobody has conducted a survey as to this is what the people want. Even if there is a survey, it is such a meaningless, superficial, it's such a poorly sample-based survey with all the prejudices that goes with generating that kind of statistics. And we universalize it that this is what the people want. So we must also build a case for an exceptional media. I am not talking about an alternative media. Alternative media talks about the quantum. Alternative media, alternative approach to the media talks about the whole media beginning to take a U-turn. I don't expect a U-turn because nowhere in the world serious journalism is mass journalism. Serious journalism and exceptional journalism. Are we willing to be a serious journalist? Or are we willing to be part of the run-of-the-mill journalist is the question that is in the mind of a young journalist today. A student must decide, am I to become a serious journalist? Then you have to work hard. You have to study 10 hours a day. You have to study diverse subjects. You need to know about the country. Most of us become journalists without knowing what this country is, what its potentiality is, how this country is being viewed by others, what is the state of America, which some parts of it I explained this morning. So, if you want to become a snippet journalist, you can become, because there is so much of opportunity. 99% of the journalists today are snippet journalists. It all depends upon what we want to be in life. And because this is essentially an audience of youngsters who want to know what they should be. That's a decision which you have to take based on 3 questions. How much money you want in life? If you want money to enjoy life, to have the better and better car, you want to live in a better and better locality, and you want to have a lot of money, then you can probably not choose journalism. If you choose journalism, it should be snippet journalism. But if you feel you have to feel proud of yourself, that you have contributed something after 30 years, you look back to your life and see what you have done. It is not the balance sheet, it is not the bank deposits, it is not the cars that you bought and enjoyed or the club that you attended that is going to make you happy. It's something else which will make you happy, for which your mental preparation is not adequate for you to realize now. And if you want to be that kind of a person who wants to be satisfied with what you have done in life 20 years, 30 years later, then you have to be a serious journalist. And a serious journalist has to be a contented journalist. And he has to join an organization which will provide scope for serious journalism. And that organization may be a small organization. That organization may not allow air-conditioned halls, rooms. That may not be able to afford taxis for you to go and pursue news. But you must be willing for this hardship. And the more number of people you can generate who are willing to undertake this kind of enterprise, this kind of undertaking, then you will see an alternative to the current media emerging in the form of an exceptional media. Even today, why the New Indian Express in the south and the Hindu command credibility? There are other newspapers which has 2 times, 3 times the circulation. They don't have respect. It is because they are wedded to truth, fair reporting. Opinions may differ. I have very serious differences with the Hindu newspaper in the opinion, though I am very close to them. In fact, they came and invited me to write in their business line newspaper, knowing full well my views are entirely different from the views of the paper. So there are newspapers. Don't think there are no good newspapers. But I think there are lack of good newspapers in northern India, not in southern India. So there are good newspapers. There are still good newspaper proprietors. There are still good journalists and editors. But the unfortunate part is there is nothing in Delhi of this kind. That's the problem. And this has to change. And this will not, this can change on its own also. But we have also to bring about this change. And in this change, what can be my role? In fact, if there is a subject in your curriculum as to how to make an exceptional journalist, or how to make an exceptional media, how to produce an exceptional article, how to make the people look at something good with interest, not just something boring, how to write good things which will attract the people's attention, create their interest, trigger them further. This should be a subject of pursuit in which you can call experts who have specialized, people like Arun Shuri, to come and talk how they transformed journalism. Even now I would ask Arun, how are you able to write a 5,000 word article and make people read it? And I always used to tell him that people read only so much that if they read your article in the paper, they don't read any other part of the paper because they don't have the time. But you can keep them attracted to your writing of one whole page article. That's the skill. And he writes a very serious subject. So it is not that you cannot become an Arun Shuri. You can become. The question is, are we willing to put in that kind of work? Are we willing to maintain only that kind of standard of living? Are we willing to join only that kind of newspaper which will not be able to give you a card? Which may not be able to afford conveniences, which newspapers which are nothing less than, I wouldn't want to use a strong word, which are nothing but selling their soul, selling their news, cash for news. Those organizations can give you a car, can give you a house, can give you everything that you want. This is the choice which you have to make. Even if 5 or 6 persons in these institutions make this choice, that difference will occur. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.